Welcome to New Realities. My name is Alan Steinfeld, and I'm interviewing someone today who I wanted to talk to for a long time. I feel he really has a link between consciousness and science, and he has the theories that will unfold the next phase of our evolution. His name is Nassim Haramein, and thank you so much for sharing your work with the world, because
thank you for having me.
Because what I get is that, from what you said also, is that you created these a theory that combines quantum physics, Einstein's relativity, and cuts out the strong and weak forces. Basically, what I get you say, there's basically two forces to the universe: gravity and electromagnetism.
Right. I've written a theory that described the vacuum as an energetic structured vacuum. And instead of thinking of objects defining the space, this theory looks at the space defining objects. And so this is a complete reversal of the way we think of reality, of the space we live in, how we are in the universe, and so on. And there's fundamental implication in that change that applies to physics and the way we think of gravity, electromagnetism, the strong and weak force, which in my equations I eliminate completely.
What I also like about you is you bring in the understanding that the vacuum is intelligent. So the void, the quantum void that emits all, is the intelligence of the universe itself. I mean, the fear is that equates to God. But the other way you're talking about it is just it's embedded in all matter. So
right.
How do you just talk not against the religious concept of God, but more an intelligence inside of us?
Yeah, in this view, the structure of the vacuum itself is the innate function of consciousness, meaning that the vacuum is like the pool of information of all things radiating in it. So in that sense, you could, if you wanted to put a word on it, you could say the word God, like it has all the information at all time. And it feeds it back through every single subatomic particles and atoms and galaxy and so on at all scales. So it's learning about itself. It's constantly changing. My theory describes all scales of the universe, from universal size to superclusters to galaxies to stars to atoms to subatomic particles, as different scales black hole. And each one feeds between the gravitational field, which is the information of the vacuum moving in, and expands electromagnetic fields, which is the information of the vacuum moving out. And the two creates this feedback loop that is the foundation for consciousness.
And creating black holes. So, and you're saying we're all inside a black hole, but getting back to the idea of consciousness. So did consciousness create matter, as it seems like you're saying, as opposed to matter creating consciousness, which is the old paradigm?
Not really, no. In this work, what we call consciousness, or which could be more accurately described as self-awareness, knowing that you're there, right? Demands a feedback. In order to be self-aware, you gotta, for instance, see yourself in the mirror and say, that's me, and know that that's you. And so it demands a feedback. And so the dynamic of the feedback between the electromagnetic field and the gravitational field is what I term self-awareness, which is what we think of as consciousness. So it is the dynamic of the information transfer that actually produces all of our material world that is fundamentally the conscious entity that we think of. So that means that everything is consciousness and everything is matter. You cannot dissociate them, and that's really important to understand. You can't dissociate matter from consciousness, matter from spirituality, matter from thoughts. It's all one, and we need to understand the dynamic of that one structure in order to have it unify instead of separating it, instead of having the physicist on one side saying it's all matter and having the spiritual people on the other side saying it's all consciousness. It's both at the same time. It's never the egg or the chicken, it's always both.
It's another fractal structure. So even in terms of consciousness or or let's say psychology, we exist within a feedback mechanism. I do something, you don't like it, you give me some feedback, I modify my behavior.
Yeah. Exactly. So the universe is doing that in some way. You can apply it to you and me, or you can think of like you're feeding information to the vacuum, and if the vacuum is what produces the material world, then the vacuum feeds you back experiences and that are directly related to how you interpret them. And as you interpret these new experiences, you feed it back again, and so goes the wheel of creation, and the result is the universe learns about itself that way.
Well, that's the exciting thing about your theory. It's as if the universe is constantly learning about itself, and us, as a representative consciousness, are moving into new territories all the time.
Right, exactly. And you could think of all the information that's dispersed, like that's radiated in the vacuum everywhere in the universe at one time, being the collection of all information potential available. Yet, because of synergy, which says that that a system is more than the addition of all the parts, because all the parts together creates, like you could think of it as the new question. In every millisecond, there's the new question that's created from the result of all the information that's available. So there's this constant learning, there's this constant pull towards higher level of consciousness, higher level of organization, higher level of coherency.
And it's fresh. Each moment, it's released as fresh newness, a novelty, ongoing into forever.
Right, because if at any moment you could create exactly what you wanted, meaning that if any moment a being could actually say, I'm going to create this exactly the way I want it, and the result was that it was not modified by all the rest of the information in the universe, and it came back to you exactly how you expected it, then the universe would end. Right? Because within seconds you would create the ultimate universe, right? And you would say, okay, that's it. And then you'd be bored from there on. So
nothing's ever what we want it to be, even on a personal level?
It's always a little bit unexpected. It's always modified by all of the rest of the information in the universe, because the universe, the vacuum, has to coordinate all the information to create this incredible complexity that's highly coherent, that's highly organized. And so in order for that to happen, it has, everything that you send to the vacuum is modified so that everything coordinates. So that you can't say at one moment, I'm going to turn off the sun because I'm a little too hot, right? And now all of a sudden, parts of the world is freezing over, right? There's a consensus. The information you're feeding the universe is modified by all of the rest of the information available, so that everything is coherent in this consensus reality.
Right, but sometimes our individual consciousness does link to let's say, the vacuum consciousness. We become one with it. I guess in that moment, there's really nothing we want, right? Because we're moving forward. There's nothing we want to manifest because we are.
In the moment, you could think of that moment as the moment of enlightenment or the moment of nirvana. But in that moment, you can see that it would be that all information would be available to you. In that moment of connecting with the fundamental vacuum of coming in contact with the fundamental vacuum, you would have all the information available. However, the new question would emerge, and the new question would emerge again, and the new question would emerge again. So enlightenment is a process.
Right.
It's a constant learning. And the perfect master must be the perfect student. And so from that view, you can start to understand the principle of evolution.
Because the universe is constantly learning about itself from itself. You say. So what will it take for normal mainstream scientists to get this? I mean, you know, you're sort of working in a vacuum in a way.
Right.
So what will it take?
Well, you know, I'm writing equations, and I've written many papers that starts to lay out the math and the dynamics in which these functions occur in space-time. So as I publish more and more papers, it becomes more and more, it brings this awareness to the scientific community, and more scientists are excited about what I'm writing and understanding it and are moving in that direction and are adding to it. And so there's new collaborations that are building. But all these things takes time, you know. It took some 10 years for Einstein to bring his theories to the world. And so, you know, we have to be patient. But as well, I do a lot of effort to bring this information to the public at large, because the implication of what I'm writing in physics is huge for the individuals out there in their home. How they think of themselves, how they think of the universe and themselves in it.
Well, that's it. Nassim has produced a DVD called Crossing the Event Horizon from the resonanceproject.org. But what is the implications of these theories? One big one is everything's a black hole, and there are black holes nested in black holes, the universe, the sun, the galaxy. We all have levels of black hole. But what's the practical implication, and how can we use this in the future?
Well, there's two levels. One of them is the philosophical practical interpretation. What it means to you when you are at home, when you think of yourself. Do you think of yourself as isolated from all things, or do you think of yourself as part of this incredible structure, of this incredible metric of the universe that's connecting at all levels? And do you think of yourself as influencing this metric? Do you think of yourself as influencing the world, influencing the universe by the way you interpret things?
So we can influence with your theories. It seems like we give feedback to the universe as well as the universe giving feedback
to us. Yeah, but we can't forget that the universe is giving feedback to us, and that's a part that typically spiritual people have a tendency to forget, is that you're not just the one creating your reality, the reality is creating you.
And it's a dance, you're saying?
And it's a dance, and it's scale related, meaning that you can influence your scale to a certain extreme, but at one point you got to gather more momentum for more people so that you can start to influence larger and larger scales. So it demands that you actually collect support, that you're able to collaborate and all this to move further and further.
Technically, I mean, I think the implications of a mechanism, can you talk a little bit about what it means to, like you said in your lecture, have a black hole in your backyard? And is that practical, and is that actually feasible at some later date to actually?
Yeah, I think so, actually. So not only is it practical for you in your living room to start to think of yourself that way and to start to see all the objects around you as connected to you through this invisible grid of the structure of the vacuum, but as well, when you start thinking that way and you start writing the math and the physics that describes this, you start to see that there's engineering possibility there. If the vacuum is full of the information that creates all things, what if you could create an object that taps into the vacuum? If you could generate another little scales of these nested scales, and that you could control this scale, then you would have access to enormous amount of information, enormous amount of energy, enormous amount of capability to curve space-time, create gravitational fields. If this is true, then our future is looking very, very bright, and it's looking very exciting, and it's not that far off.
Well, you have the theories that say, okay, that it's possible to create mini black holes. That's looks like it's actually practical. What do we need to have in order for that to happen? People say a lot of energy, but what do you think we need?
Actually, from my equations, the idea, first of all, is that mini black holes are generated by nature all the time.
Really?
That is, that there's not just one big bang in some miraculous way that created all the atoms, but actually that there is atoms being created at the center of galaxies all the time, at the center of stars all the time, and that there's a continuous creation process that is occurring right now, and that's why the universe is expanding, and actually that's why it's accelerating and it expands as well, and as well because it spins. But the other thing is that if you wanted to make an artificial singularity, if you wanted to even just like try to cohere, because if you calculate how much energy is in the vacuum to produce the universe, you would only need to connect with it, to cohere it, to tap it, just a teeny weeny bit, just a teeny weeny bit of it would be an enormous amount of energy. And so if you wanted to organize it so that you could use it, you'd probably need to start to understand the spin component of it and how things orbit and how it interacts and what is its geometry and all this. And that's some of the math I've started to write. So
and how space-time twirls together. And
that's right, Coriolis effect and all this. The dynamics of this vacuum structure would have to be known so that you could engineer a device that could tap into it. And that's really a possibility if the universe is truly the result of the vacuum structure.
Well, you know, as you're talking, I'm thinking, well, how does this relate to the human being? And it seems like this spinning vortex is the thing that's giving us life. I mean, it's the spirit itself. And does that, in your theories, go anywhere outside the body? I mean, what is the essence of soul, spirit, in your theory?
Yeah, actually, you know, if you look at spin components in my theory, it is the base of all the forces, meaning that you can think of the vacuum as this pool of water, and when the pool is spinning, it's producing little vortices. And wherever there's a vortice in the vacuum, we say, oh, there's a thing, right? Could be a star, could be a galaxy, you know, the big vortex arms of a galaxy, or it could be an atom or a subatomic particle. So, you know, the spin dynamic is fundamental to you know, the way we look at this vacuum and how the vacuum interact to produce a reality.
So where's the soul then?
How matter gathers and how information gathers. And so if you wanted to do a physical interpretation of the soul, you could say that the soul is the information that's gathered by the vortices generated by a specific set of information, by a specific being. So in the vacuum, a vortex would gather a very specific set of information. You can think of yourself as this little vortex, like for instance, the billions of atoms that you're made of, all spinning very fast and gathering a very specific set of information. And that would be what maybe spiritual people would call the soul. It would be a set of information embedded in the structure of the vacuum.
But then it just, within vortices in a pool, that would then just, when the vortices stop spinning, it just dissolves into the
pool. But it's a really interesting thing, an experiment you can do in your tub when you take a bathtub next time. You know, bring with you a plate in your tub and try to get the water to go calm, and then push the plate in the tub, and you'll see two little vortices you know, organizing on either side of the plate, and they'll be turning in the opposite direction. And if you look carefully, you'll see a little string that connects them under the water. And if you put your hand in the string, you'll see the vortex disappear. And if you take your hand out, you'll see them reappear. So when the vortices disappear into the pool of information of the vacuum, it doesn't mean it's gone. It doesn't mean that there's no more. It just means it has integrated with all the information of the vacuum, but it can recohere in vortices in the correct conditions.
And we never actually lose information is one of your
That's
things.
right.
So the information of who we were, let's say, as a being is always
present. There's no information loss. There's no energy loss. It's always present. So it can recohere, but what it's doing is that it's constantly changing, it's constantly being modified, it's constantly learning, and that is the driving force of creation.
In the present. So it seems like you do have a theory of everything. I mean, from physics to spirituality to ancient civilizations, which we can also talk about. But is there any anomalies? Is there anything you haven't figured out? No, really, because
there's plenty.
Like what's an anomaly within your system that you say, I just can't seem to fit this in? That's like sticking out at you.
It's difficult to define all of the dynamics of nature, meaning that there is. If I was to answer that question honestly, I would say I haven't found anything that doesn't fit, except that every second there's something new.
Right.
And so that new thing has to be fitted in. And so there's new part of the theory that grows and grows and grows because I'm getting new sets of information constantly. So it's a constant growth, and I don't think there'll ever be a theory that can explain everything, because everything is constantly changing. So it is the theory, but if the theory is fundamentally correct, I truly believe that there is fundamental understandings. And if they are clear and fundamentally correct, I think a theory can grow in a very harmonious way, in a unified way, and continue to incorporate more and more complexity, just as nature does.
Which is what you're doing. So your theory, you don't feel is static. This is a set of formulas, and this is how the universe is. Your theory is a dynamic theory.
It is dynamic, although there's fundamental axioms to it that seems to be accurate, that seems to work, that seems to define a new level of understanding of our universe. And I'm sure that eventually those will change and evolve, and hopefully somebody will be able to add to it that makes it even more precise and give us even more capability to interact with the universe and understand it better. But I think it's a very large change already from what is currently being propagated in the mainstream.
Well, we'll see. You're saying also that you were living inside a big black hole. The universe itself is a black hole.
Yes.
But that probably isn't the end to the fractal. That's probably, the universe itself is...
It's probably embedded in a larger one, which is embedded in a larger one, and so on. And so there is probably infinite amount of fractal boundary condition. If you say to a 7-year-old, this is the boundary of our universe, as we say usually, in class now. We say, our universe has a boundary, and that's what it's in. The first thing the kid asks you is, well, what is that in, and how did it get there? And so my point here is to say, actually, there is no such thing as an end to anything. There's only boundary conditions that are embedded from infinitely big to infinitely small.
Right.
And what's important is not if there's a beginning or an end, but what's important is how it embeds itself, what is the dynamics that produce the embeddedness, and how we can understand those dynamics to make our world a better world.
So, thank you. I get that. And just talk as we kind of wrap up here about the evolution, where we're going as a civilization, how we need this next step, and maybe 2012. Is that really a critical point?
Well, if you look at the way the universe learns and the way the things grow in our universe, it seems like they go through boundary condition to boundary condition. There's like quantum jumps. There's moments, they're very specific moments where energy levels reach a certain level and then eventually get into a chaotic mode, and then they go into really high level of chaos just before they pop into the next resonant
Right,
level.
it looks like systems are going to break down and totally collapse, or they jump to the next level.
And so I think we're experiencing one of those moments in our history right now, and that is telling, it's telling because you can see the chaotic functions, increasing in our society, and you can see those signs for already quite a while, and now I think we're getting really, really close to popping into this new level. And so I think that the 2012 dates and all this are, are boundary condition. And that's why I like to think, and I call my DVD set Crossing the Event Horizon. It's crossing this boundary condition, is our crossing of our consciousness into this new level. It's crossing of our understanding into this new level of new physics and everything, and it's crossing the technological advancements into this new level as well.
Well, it seems like your theories are very much a part of the new level, and you also have said that new level is about being a galactic being, getting off the Earth as one level of finiteness into the next level.
Right. So, I think these theories and this new understanding leads directly to our capacity to literally ascend. And I don't mean it in terms of spirituality, but as well in terms of spirituality, but literally produce technology that allows us to move off the surface of our planet and actually start to experience our universe as an abundant universe. Right now we're kind of stuck on the surface, kind of stuck on a conveyor belt, and we have very little capability to regulate our lives. If something happens to our planet, it's pretty well over. A society that reached higher levels of consciousness, higher levels of technology, would demand that they are able to get off the surface of the planet and of their planet before large cataclysms occur, which could be quite frequent, cosmologically speaking, in terms of planetary systems. Planetary systems are not that stable. And so a society has to learn to understand gravity and to understand how to use it so that they're not necessarily stuck to the surface if something happens.
Great. I really appreciate your work. I think it's very, very important that enough people integrate this new knowledge to take us into what my program's called New Realities.
Yes.
And I just welcome you to come back anytime. And
Thank you very much. It was great to be here.
Anything you have to say about living into a new realities?
May the vacuum be with you.
Thank you. I'm talking to Nassim Haramein.
Haramein.
TheResonanceProject.org. Get the DVD, the Crossing the Event Horizon. I hope you'll be back. And this is Alan Steinfeld for New Realities. Email me at newrealities@earthlink.net or check my website, newrealities.com. Thank you.